Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Hannah Nabulsi. For those of you who don't know me, I am a 2L at George Washington Law School, and I'm working with Dean Hessler currently as a research assistant on the Animal Legal Education Initiative. I do want to mention first that Dean Hessler, unfortunately, is not feeling well today, so I will be substituting for her as the moderator. But she did ask me to extend her apologies for not being able to be here today. I know that she was really looking forward to engaging with you all in this webinar and kickstarting the series to this. But we hope she feels better soon and will be able to join us for the next one. Also, I will mention this is my first time moderating a panel like this. So I'm very excited to be doing this, but also appreciate your patience as I kind of get into the swing of things. So before I ask the five panelists to introduce themselves today, I want to give just a quick overview of the Animal Legal Education Initiative at GW, which we also just call the ALEI. So what we hope to achieve with this webinar, what we hope to achieve is to introduce this webinar series that will help us better integrate and grow animal law as a standalone discipline within the legal academy. One way we want to do this is by fostering conversations and creating opportunities for faculty across the country to collaborate and support each other. So this is really a space to kind of foster conversations and create connections, provide resources, and answer any questions that you all may have. So this webinar is just the first one of several that we plan to offer. The next two are actually already in the works. And just as a heads up, the next one will be on March 6th at noon Eastern time. And the topic of that second webinar will be what to do with your course. I also want to mention that all of these webinars are recorded and we will be posting them on the GW Animal Law website. So you're more than welcome to reference back to them if you find it helpful. And please do recommend the recordings to anyone in your network that you think might benefit from them. Okay, so moving into the substance of today's webinar, the topic, I'm sure as you know, is having, getting, and keeping an animal law class. So now I would like to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves. So we can go ahead and start with Professor Wooters.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Hannah, for all of your work on this, and to Kathy and everyone at GW. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Conley Wouters. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Illinois Chicago School of Law. I teach legal writing and contracts. I do not teach animal law. I think I'm the only person on this panel that never has. So it's kind of great. I think it's like maybe the one time my inexperience at something is hopefully useful. So I'm in the process of kind of planning to get a class going. Spring 2025 is the goal.
Thank you so much. Professor Critser, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Hannah. Hi, I'm Rebecca Critser, she, her pronouns. Actually, I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at Hopkins. I work with Dr. Paul Locke. I have the sort of privilege of teaching there with him. Don't teach law students there, but then I also teach at IU McKinney in Indianapolis and at Lewis and Clark in Oregon. And so most of what I talk about will be those latter two organizations. I do have to put a little asterisk that everything I say here is my own individual opinions and experiences. Nothing is the policy or positions of the institutions themselves. And I'm really excited to be here with you all.
Thank you so much. Professor Henry?
Hi, I'm Ralph Henry. I have taught as an adjunct at George Mason Law School for 15 years and at Georgetown for 7. Both are in the animal law sort of context. One, the former is a seminar. It's much more doctrinally focused. The latter is a practicum in which students have a placement during the course with the Humane Society of the United States for a few hours a week. So the courses are very structurally very different. And in my day job, I am the Director of Litigation for the Humane Society of the United States.
Thank you very much. Professor Lowry?
Hi, I would echo what Conley said. Thanks, Hannah and Dean Hessler for the work on this. My name is Will Lowry. I run a group called Animal Partisan that focuses on issues with animals in agriculture and research. I taught my first animal law class in 2022 at the University of St. Thomas School of Law. I'm currently teaching at the University of Oklahoma School of Law. It's their first animal law class, and we'll be teaching at Vermont Law School in the summer, and they're all structured very differently. So a lot of learnings for me from each one.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, one of our own GW, Professor Perry.
Thanks so much, Hannah. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much for taking over moderating, and we send our best wishes to Kathy in hopes that she feels better soon. Big thanks to you guys, all of you at GW who've really been creating some scaffolding around the question of animal law and especially all the ways that this field can grow and solidify and be all the more useful and important. It's just so great to see this kind of growth. I come at it from an old timer's perspective. So I'm going to tell some old stories about walking, 20 miles in the snow to the bus stop and that kind of thing. So I've been involved in animal law for over 3 decades, and it started for me when I was in law school at Lewis and Clark and starting an animal law group, and then ultimately sort of came full circle when I had the opportunity to teach animal law at Lewis and Clark and George Mason, and now I've been at GW for over 2 decades. And it's just such a joy to have the opportunity to do this work and get the really important perspectives and updates that you get when you stay in the teaching world from students and from just being engaged with the cases and the material. And my day job is I am the Senior Vice President of Government Relations for the ASPCA. So I've been there for 12 years doing lobbying work at the state and federal level, and really excited to be here for this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for those introductions. And like I said, we want this to be a space where we can foster connections and meet each other. So please feel free to drop in the chat what school you're affiliated with and where you're from. We'd love to learn more about you as well.
And no one should be shy about having their camera on if they desire to. Obviously not if you don't, but it's great to be able to see everyone's faces too if you feel like it.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we structured this webinar to break down our topic, again, having, getting, and keeping an animal law course, breaking it down into several topics that will really allow us to explore the intricacies of planning an animal law course. So I'd like to start today by talking about enrollment and specifically appealing to a broader student body. So my first question is, how do you get students interested in an animal law course, particularly at a school that maybe has never offered an animal law course before, and the student body may not know so much about what an animal law course entails and what to expect?
I'm happy to start off with that one. And again, I'm speaking only from my limited data points, but what has been, I'd say, tried and true for me is having connections with students that are currently in the school. The first 2 classes that I've been involved in came about from students that were former interns of mine who just had a passion for animal law and worked within the school to sort of drum up support and talk to people. I have also, on the other side, sort of cold sent letters to people like, hey, you don't know me, would love to do a class. That was a complete failure. But when you have students that are in the class and they know the school, they know the faculty, they know the deans, and they know the students, and they can drum up support, I think that's a great place to start. So, it's a lot different having someone on the inside than trying to come in from the outside.
Yeah, I would sort of, similar to what Will's saying, and I guess this depends on if you're already at the school, but as obvious as it sounds, I just try to tell students that there's something called animal law to begin with, because a lot of them don't know, right? Especially, like, a lot of people don't know that, and so especially 1Ls. So, even just mentioning that I've worked on an animal law matter means they're inevitably going to ask, what is that? I also try to remind students, explain it like we often explain it. It's everything, right? So I do a dog bite problem in my legal writing class, and I really try to leverage that to make connections of the kind Will was talking about with students who might be interested in looking at it not from the perspective of just a negligence claim, right? But like, okay, what's happening to the animal here when these other parties are arguing about their own legal rights and obligations? So I think, again, if you're already at a school or you have a connection to a school, just trying to be creative about the ways you use those. I sometimes think of it as like sneaking it in, but I found the students are really receptive to it and really curious. So just kind of starting those conversations.
If you're going to keep enrollments up from year to year, in my experience, you're going to have plenty of students who are only just curious about animal law in your class, and that's fine. I think that's a good thing. And for both the student body and for animal protection work in general. And so it's, I think, helpful to think about the things that students who are just curious about animal law will be interested in, even down to sort of the time the course is offered. I have taught my course from 8 to 10 p.m. Brutal. From 6 to 8 p.m., 4 to 6, 3 to 5, 1 to 3 over the course of many years. And so the time the course is offered, whether it sort of fits into an upper level elective sort of schedule, because the types of students that will probably take your course are different than the types of students who are going to be forced to take torts or want to take environmental laws or 2L, something like that. And so thinking about the types of students and, sort of what they would be interested in. And then, as Conley mentioned, talking to them about it if you can. I tend to tell students when I go to sort of student fairs and that type of thing, that so much of what they'll learn in the class is about law and policy reform movement lawyering and mission-based advocacy and stuff that sort of translates well beyond the animal law world, in hope that that kind of gets students interested enough to think, well, I'll learn something other than whatever the doctrine of animal law is.
Yeah, I think the old joke about animal law is that, try and come up with any topic in the legal field that isn't connected to animal law. And it's really difficult to do that. There seems to be some way to connect to any other field. So when we do our first intros and the courses, I'm always interested in where students say they want to go with their legal career, and then try to probe with them a little bit about ways that they could be involved in protecting animals in the course of their work in the tax law field or the criminal law field or whatever it is. I mean, it's the most intersectional area of law I can think of. So we can definitely lean on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that curiosity and kind of showing how animal law ties into all of the different aspects of the law are very important. Have any of you found certain strategies for advertising an animal law class that kind of ties all of those factors into it beneficial? Have you found that something has really worked for you in your experience?
When we have talked about ways to boost enrollment for the GW course, and one of the things we did last semester was held a panel talking about the recent Supreme Court case. And in the course of that panel, we had an opportunity to mention that we had an animal law seminar coming up. And I think it's useful just to showcase the issues in any form you can. So if there's already some empathetic voice or even some interconnection you can make with an environmental law program or a food law program or any number of ways, trying to have an event. And then I hate to say it, but providing food if possible does seem to be a really critical element for getting audiences there. And then just making sure people know that this exists. It's easy to miss it or not know what it is.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Sorry, Will. I'll just throw out there, in advertising to students, I think one thing that I underestimated early on was taking advantage of sort of the focus of the work we do in animal law, which is the animals. Most people love animals. So, you can use pictures of cute animals and your advertisements that you can put out through student organizations. Make sure that they're posting in the lobby potentially, or whatever the format is that they use. And it really draws in students a lot, because everyone has a connection to an animal in some way, and they think, oh, I can get law credit and have fun talking about animals. Why would I not want to do this? So it may sound simple, but I have had success with it.
Can I just jump in really quick and say I forgot to tell you this, Rebecca, but I saw Rebecca's syllabus, and it did have amazing clip art of animals, and it was the only syllabus I've ever seen, and I thought the same thing. Like, I bet students love that. So yeah.
I was just going to say, and echoing a lot, I think just using internal channels of the school, they're all going to be different. Some have listservs, some have forums. Sometimes you can talk to a professor in an adjunct field or a related field like environmental law. But I personally, again, for me, I still think it's sort of student word of mouth. Anecdotally, at my Oklahoma class, on the first day, I asked the students why they're here, and so many of them said, because of Greta, and Greta was the student that churned up support. And so she had been running around telling so many students, this class is here, it's such a cool topic, come join. And I don't think any amount of advertising I might have tried to do or anybody else would have had sort of the impact. And they've heard about it for so long, and they've heard about it from somebody they know and is interested. So again, just back to making the connection and using channels within the school to spread the word, sort of very tactically.
I'll just echo, channels within the school can be really helpful. A placed professor that's sort of in the same, if they have the same, animals law is a little bit different than everything else, but and the same, and basically the same as everything else, as Nancy pointed out. But if you have a well-placed professor who's talking to students about your course, that can be great. Or if there's an office of public interest work or some other programmatic office that will advertise in sort of student listserv emails. We lost enrollment in Georgetown over the years, and 2 years ago I went to just a community a public interest student fair and started talking to students who were unaware, most of them, that there was even an animal law course, despite the fact that it's in the course catalog, and when you go to sign up you'll discover it. And our enrollment shot up immediately. And I went to a student group fair. Georgetown had for many years a SOUDF chapter. It now no longer has a chapter. I went to a student organization fair last year, and even got brought up on the stage to fire out t-shirt guns, which really helped enrollment as well. So just in general, like connecting with folks that are on campus that can get the word out to students is helpful.
I think to that point, people who are going to be engaging with students as they select classes, like the registrar, career services, those types of people, I think connecting with them is also very useful.
Thank you so much. That kind of leads me into my next point. I wanted to talk a bit about how to sustain a course. I know a lot of the barriers that schools can run into with offering animal law courses is low enrollment. And so oftentimes administration will want to cut the course if not many people are signed up for it. So do you have any strategies that professors can use to try to keep up enrollment from year to year?
Good class surveys certainly helps. Getting people to say that they found value in the class. I mean, and again, my limited experience, that's been something that people have looked to, and it's an expectation that they're going to look at that and they're going to judge that to say whether this course should continue. I think from my perspective, that's especially important for new classes where the university has not had an animal law class before, and they're very much testing the waters to see if this is something that should be sustained. They want to make sure that students are getting value. So I think getting good surveys is obviously helpful.
I also wouldn't underestimate just sort of the power of word of mouth. Students talk. And so, if you have students who really enjoy the class and you can encourage them to sort of tell their friends, tell their peers, spread the word. It's been a really great way. I've had students come from one year saying, oh, so-and-so from the past year was in your course, and so that's why I'm here now. And it's been really nice to see. So I would encourage that as well.
it may be obvious, but if there is any kind of organized either SALDF chapter or other type of animal law chapter, or even environmental, or again, any kind of close connection, going to them and asking if they have a newsletter or any form of communication, and they're willing to spread the word about the class. I think that's great. I mean, we have such a natural advantage of having animals to talk about, which, you know, universally is an attractive topic for people. And then we also have the advantage of it just being an interesting course in the, you know, in comparison to so many in law schools. I'm sorry to say, but, you know, it's not all fascinating. And so I think we have some advantage there. And a lot of these intro courses are surveys, so they're not deep dives. And that's also interesting. I think the majority of the students that I've had over the years are not animal law kids. They're not folks that are going to go into this, you know, for their profession, but they have a critical role to play. And even letting them know that, you know, that somewhere along the way, you might be in a position to make a difference, and we want you to be ready to do that. I think just empowering students to know that, and hopefully they will share that kind of information with others.
I'll reiterate sort of a point I made before about timing of classes. The only time I've lost a course due to lack of enrollment was when another course, a natural resources practicum, so it was also a practicum, got moved to the exact same day and time. If you're an adjunct especially, you probably shouldn't rely on the school to make sure that there are not conflicts like that. And so you may want to pay attention to them from semester to semester. The other thing I've done is if there is a SALDF chapter or another relevant student group, maybe like an environmental law society, or even one that might not seem relevant, go to the Federalist Society and ask them if they'll poll their members as to what day and time they would like the course to be offered. That can have two functions. One, you can send the information to the administration, especially if they're a little bit sheepish about giving you a particular spot that they might think, time slot that they might think is better reserved for other courses. And also now all of a sudden you've told a bunch of students that there exists this course. And so you can get you know, some interest. I've done that several years where I've sort of asked student groups to send out a poll to their listserv. When would you like to see an animal law course offered? Even though I try to keep it consistent year to year, the same semester, same day and time if I can, but have adjusted it when the polls come back a little different.
Thank you so much to all of you for that comprehensive answer to my questions. Before I move on to the next subtopic, which is working with the administration, I do just want to let the participants know that we are more than welcome, or we are more than happy to answer any questions that you have as well. So please feel free, drop them in the chat, or feel free to take yourself off mute to ask any questions.
I do think there's one in the chat, Hannah.
Yes, I see it. Okay, thank you. From Julia Williams. So how did they go about getting a school to start offering an animal law course?
I didn't get an animal law course started when I was a student, so I've never been the one to initiate it, but I did get the very first SALDF chapter started, and the first animal law conference, and the first law review. And it's really the same procedure. It's basically understanding the administration of the law school, understanding what role different professors play, and then finding student allies who can build support. And for me, it's a lot of old-fashioned grassroots tactics, you know, building a list of support, you know, endorsement for the concept, showing that there's actual student interest, because in the end, the schools are most interested in knowing what students do want, and having a sustained sort of communication approach, you know, having students reach out to the administration and say, we'd really like this, offering to provide a presentation to them about what the course would look like, why it would be of value, what other schools have that course. ALDF has an incredible bank of information pulling all that kind of that data together that you can rely on and share. Really, it's a bit of a sales question, really sharing why the school would benefit from it and how it might attract students to the school. These are not small matters for the administration. So, being willing to be a bit of an organizer, I think.
Yeah, I just saw in the chat, Gina answered that just cold called the dean. I did the same thing, and my dean's great and she's awesome, and they were like, yeah, that sounds good for next year. Now, obviously, I'm thinking, it seems too easy, and I think there is probably some point where I'm gonna have to do what you're talking about, Nancy. But I did just want to again plug ALDF. I actually have a call with Priscilla next week, I think, about exactly this, sort of like how to present it, because I do want to kind of schedule a meeting to follow up on that and to have a plan and to do everything. And I think Priscilla and I have talked a little bit, Priscilla Rader at the ALDF, and so I'd really encourage, everyone obviously take advantage of that as well.
Just wanted to say on the topic of cold calling, it's nice to see some have had luck. Maybe I'm not a good cold caller, but before I got my first class, I sort of went on the map and I picked law schools within like a 6-hour drive. I was like, yeah, I'll drive to these law schools that didn't have an animal law class. And I wrote a letter to each one of them. I picked who I thought would be the right person. And I think I probably sent a dozen letters and I got one response saying, hey, we'll pass this along to the right person. And that never led anywhere. So it was kind of an abject failure for me. And I've often wondered, did I burn bridges? Are they going to remember me if I come back a few years from now and they're going to be like, that was the guy that just randomly sent us a letter. We don't want him. So it's nice to hear that others had success. That was not my experience, unfortunately, but that could be my problem.
Wait, Will, you typed out a letter and like printed it out and put it in an envelope and put it in the U.S. Postal Service mail system?
A few of them where I couldn't find email addresses, I did. For the others, I emailed a letter attachment.
Okay, I just wanted to check on method.
Sorry, one more thing, just to qualify and add one more detail. I don't think mine counts as a cold call in the way that you're talking about, Will, right? Because I was already employed by the school. The other thing is my school has an animal law class listed that has just been dormant for like 10 years. So obviously I was like, it's already here, can I just teach it? So that helps, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you for that. That actually leads directly into my next question, which is, if the school has previously had an animal law class that has since been canceled, do you think that can be used to your advantage to leverage the administration to offer it again? And if so, what do you think is the best way to use that as leverage?
I think yes, but this is going to sort of partly answer the question before as well. I think when there's a class that's dormant, you can't expect that the administration knows what value it adds to the school. They don't remember the course. They probably don't remember how it fit into programming. And so you can fill in that gap. You can say, look, you had this on the books and there's a reason for it. And if you pitch why your course adds value for the students, for the school, some of the things that Nancy mentioned, I think that's a way to use it as a sort of jumping off point into a conversation. And I'm just going to add to that an answer to a question that I suspect no one's going to ask. But that's, should I try to teach an animal law course as an adjunct? Because I will tell you that like 6 years into teaching, I still wasn't sure that I had any business teaching law school students animal law or anything else. I think it's probably kind of good to be worried about that a little bit. And so I think it really benefits you to think about what you will add to this, to sort of the student experience, the law school, what you hope to get out of the course. Are you trying to spread the news about animal law? Do you really want to see people do animal law right as best as you and your colleagues sort of view it? And so, do you want to tell war stories and talk about the practical, aspects of teaching animal law? Like, what do you think you add of value to students' law school experience, besides just they've never heard of animal law, so we're going to expose them. That's a big piece of it for sure. And so I think if you answer those questions and you're at the end of that still excited about teaching and want to dive into it, then that's the stuff that you tell the administration. And it can be helpful if you put together a syllabus. You don't need all the materials that, reading materials, prep materials, that kind of thing. But I view syllabus construction as sort of storytelling. I think about what I want the students to sort of gain, even in a seminar context where student input is a huge portion of what happens. And we're not, sort of predetermining exactly, what's going to be delivered in every class. I want the students to have sort of a sense of where we're going to go and why we're going to go there. If you've already worked that out, you can tell that to the administration, and I think that helps sell the course.
Just to add to Ralph's point, I'm glad he brought that up. I mean, animal law is one of those topics where it's 2 words and it sounds like it's all the same class, but you could have 12 different classes that look completely different. And so you have to create that as the professor. You are creating that story or narrative, like Ralph said. And I think it's very worthwhile to stop and think about, what is the story you want to tell? What's the output? So I think that's a great point, just because it is such a wide and diverse topic.
Yeah, and I would just add sort of, I guess, 2 related thoughts. One is, don't be afraid to reach out to your network, including the network you're building here today. Because I think whether it's through maybe through alumni of the school you're at, if you can have an introduction through them, or if you can get coffee with faculty who's on boards at the school to learn the culture of the school, that can be huge. So, don't be afraid to do a little bit of homework and background and reach out. I know that all the panelists here, we were talking about this earlier, we're all very happy to help facilitate connections when we can, and I'm sure others on here would be as well.
Thank you so much. So my next question is, what do administrators typically want to know about the course that you're proposing? And is it common for the administration to require a course proposal? If so, what is the best way to figure out what the administration might want in that and how to structure that proposal?
I think as someone mentioned, asking other people, I've had so much help from people that have taught this class for a lot longer than I have, to give me a syllabus, let me see what you taught, or how did you structure it? So I think asking people is certainly a helpful start. In my experiences, schools that have not had a class, they want to see a decent amount. I mean, they want to see, what is the topic? What are the specific areas? How are you going to grade? I think a big issue that's come up for me is, how are you going to teach this class? i.e., are you trying to convert everyone in the room to vegans, or are you going to give a balanced approach to the class? That's been an issue that people, really want to see a balanced approach, and that this is not an advocacy class. So, I think reaching out to others, getting their documents, seeing how you can model those is certainly a good start.
Yeah, it occurs to me, I mean, we don't even ask each other to see each other's syllabuses that often, and it's so enriching to do that. I'm always looking to make adjustments and improve my offerings in the class. And so I think just finding those folks who are willing to share, like if the school does require a course proposal under the question you posed, Hannah, going to someone who's done that on the faculty, and it might take a little bit to find them, but generally speaking, people like being approached and asked how they did something successfully, and just seeing a prototype. I mean, I think we don't have to reinvent wheels. If you can find a proposal that was received well by the administration, you can mimic some of the elements of that in your proposal. And I think also talking, about the popularity and the increase and the rise in this field, the ways in which it's been metabolized in the legal field, the fact that the Supreme Court had a major case around animal law very recently is really interesting. Talking about the expansion of career opportunities for students so that the law school can think about how it's providing career opportunities by offering the course is really valuable. And that's one thing that adjuncts sometimes can provide, and that is, a contact with the networks out in the professional setting and even potentially opportunities for internships or externships, being explicit about that as something that, you would look forward to welcoming students into the working world in whatever channels are appropriate. Like the practicum that Ralph mentioned, I mean, that's an incredible opportunity to meet other professionals in the field. So these are things that I think, specifically speaking about kind of an adjunct approach, where you're balancing professional work with the academic, I think that's a really big advantage.
I just want to hit home two things that I think have been said, but I just want to repeat. I think most administrations care a lot about students passing the bar and having a job. And I think you can tie in the fact that animal law touches on almost every other area of law to support the idea that it can actually help students in the bar exam. And I think the fact that it's a growing field speaks to employability. So I just wouldn't leave those 2 points out in any proposal, because almost all schools tend to care about those 2 topics.
Thank you. I see that we have a few questions in the chat. So this one says, to follow up on Ralph's point, any thoughts for potential adjuncts on balancing teaching and day job responsibilities?
I have 2 quick thoughts. This is a good moment for me to mention that I team teach all of my courses, which has been super beneficial, because then if you, as an adjunct, then if you get caught having an emergency for work, or personal emergency, you can sometimes lean on the co-teacher. I also like that framework from the standpoint of avoiding biases and making sure to hear from all the students, because one person acts as sort of peanut gallery while the other is sort of the leader of a session, at least as we run it. And so, in fact, one of my co-teachers is on here, I see, as a participant, Rebecca Carey. And so we, in that way, when you're sort of teaching, maybe you're engaging with one of the gunners, so to speak, and then there's someone else who seems to be trying to inject an idea that person can help. And so that's a balance that's useful in class and out of class, but that won't work for everybody, of course. And then I've also had very, very different experiences as between the practicum that I mentioned and the seminar. The seminar, the first year was major amount of work, but afterwards you certainly want to keep it fresh and updated. You want to be responsive to student input during the year, but it's not as much of a time suck. The practicum, where I've got students in placement, is a massive undertaking, and I was just very fortunate that my organization views part of our job, the lawyer's job in the sort of offensive legal department, as going out and sort of building up the base of animal lawyers. And so I kind of have a permission to spend some time on the coursework, which is nice. So I may be just fortunate.
Well, I think I mentioned it already, but I really consider it incredibly enriching to my professional side to have an opportunity to sit and look at what's evolving in the litigation world, and the whole legal field, so that I can stay up to date with that, and so that my mind stays connected to what's happening in the field. It's really easy to get in your bubble professionally and sort of lose touch with everything else. So I feel like teaching animal law for me is very enriching and keeps me connected. But I also do think that it's valuable, as I mentioned before, to be able to provide that kind of real world perspective and share some stories with students about what's going on in the field and how some of these ideas actually hit the ground. Do they get traction? Do they not? What are the challenges if you're trying to operationalize concepts that can be a bit academic? So I think there are benefits to those of you who would be doing this in a adjunct fashion and balancing another career, and really big benefits to the students.
I think that's definitely a question as far as how to balance, to stop and be thoughtfully explicit about and just think about it and don't jump in. When I did my first one, I didn't know what I was getting into. I was so excited to have the chance to teach animal law, and it was a huge time sink, and it took so much time to build the syllabus, to grade. they wanted to add more students, and I was like, sure, more students, great, not thinking that each one of those is another exam, another quiz, and that sort of stuff. And so I don't know the answer, but I would just say think about that, and also talk to other people that have taught, whether at the same school or the same number of credit class. I think that is definitely something, especially if you don't have a co-teacher, like Ralph mentioned, that you could get into trouble with if you don't have a plan heading in.
Yeah, my co-professor is also Rebecca Carey, who's here, and thank goodness for her. She saved me last week when my horse was ill and I couldn't come to class. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you all. I see we have another question in the chat. It says, how and why did you all respectively choose to teach animal law as either a textbook-based course versus not?
I'll kick this one off. I think, I'm of the opinion that I have we talked about a very particular narrative that I am teaching my students, and I find that it's sometimes difficult to teach that narrative and following the curriculum laid out in a particular textbook. So for that reason, I tend not to. I also kind of like to save my students some money and buying a textbook. Not that I don't want to support, I do. But it's not to say that I don't use them at all. I have many of the textbooks, and occasionally I will assign, a reading of this section or that section. But the other, piece of it is just, as much as there are several textbooks out there that are available, and they're great and they cover a lot, they don't cover it all. And as this field continues to evolve and there's newer topics, they don't necessarily cover those. So my approach has been to sort of not rely on a textbook, certainly use them as a resource, but I sort of put my readings together outside of that.
Great, thank you. I'd like to pivot a little bit now to discuss working with the administration once your course has already been approved. So my question is, what kind of training or support could you expect from the administration once they've agreed to offer your course?
I hope someone has an answer that's different than mine. Maybe Conley can chime in since he's already sort of insider. But my answer in my experience, just my experience, as Rebecca said, it's just where I've been, is not much at all. But it's vastly different between the two schools that I'm at. So one of my schools at the beginning of every year does an orientation. No matter how many times you've gone through it, you get to meet other adjuncts. It's only like 2 hours, but you talk through sort of like talking shop a little bit, anecdotes about where you've been in your teaching and things you've run into, and that's very helpful. And they also connect with me throughout the semester. They're very, very involved as to whether or not students are succeeding. Even back in COVID, that school was very, very interested in exactly how the classroom was going and what, whether it was functioning in the sort of remote and then hybrid environment. The other law school is completely the opposite experience. I have one assistant dean that I talk to who's the only person who pays attention to my work. There is no training. There's nothing. I can walk in the door, teach my course, walk out. I'm supposed to get a review every 3 years, I think. They say they're going to sit in on a course. I've been there 15 years, and someone has sat on my course twice. And once was the last class this year, 15th year. So my experience has been varied.
So I can't really speak to it too much, Ralph, because I am on the inside, but I haven't had that much interaction with the administration. But one thing I have been fortunate for, and was unexpected just because it didn't even cross my mind, but our marketing department got wind of, they'll send out surveys what are you doing, basically, to all the faculty. And so they found I was interested in animal law, and the person there was she was great. She was super interested. She asked for more information. She wrote up something on the website that they post on all their social media. That's how I learned our school has an Instagram, because a student told me that he saw the post about animal law. So I think keeping in mind, in addition to administration, and someone touched on this earlier, but I was really pleasantly surprised that there was some kind of other channel to go through and to promote this stuff. Now, whether that translates into the actual course and the sort of institutional support and resources that we're talking about, I don't know. I guess TBD.
Thank you very much. Then one last question I'd like to ask regarding administration. In your experience, to the panelists, have you had to repitch your course every year that you'd like to offer it? Or once it's already been offered, is there kind of a smoother process that you can reboot that course every year?
Yeah, I suspect this may be variable as well at different institutions, but my experience is we got this course in the door and they were happy to have us. And I think as long as so far, fingers crossed, students haven't complained, we haven't been brought up to the administration in a negative way, they're happy to allow us to sort of continue to do what we're doing. And so, yeah, I haven't had to repitch it in any way, thankfully.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move now to talking about working with the student body. I know that we touched on it a little bit, and the value of students has really been honed in on, and how that can really help advance your course. But my question is, how do you go about finding those students who would be interested in helping you build a SOLDIF or build an animal law course, especially at a school that doesn't have that already? How do you find those students?
I can say in the almost year that I've been here, I guess my answer would be like, rely on the people who have found the students at schools nearby. So we're lucky in Chicago, we have a bunch of law schools, and I'll put this in the chat later, but I have to mention this because I know Michael's on the call. Michael Swistera, who's also based in Chicago, and me and another lawyer out here who's currently teaching animal law at DePaul are starting, it starts Friday, something we're calling the Chicago Animal Law Student Project. And it's basically, the idea is exactly what it sounds like. And Michael, if I misrepresent anything here, just jump in. We've sort of solicited all the schools that already have a SOLDIF, and we basically just cold emailed all the students, anyone we thought of would be interested, and we're getting them together to do like not actual supervised legal work, but things like submitting comments on proposed rules or looking into potential legislation. And so I advertised that in my class, and a lot of students came out. So I guess the moral of the story is, I think, relying on the schools that maybe do have those structures in place for students, and trying to see if you can get involved with them in some way, or even just reaching out to the people there and asking them, the professors there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think reaching out to the SOLDIF chapter, if there is one, obviously that would be great, and they can make connections. If not, ALDF's a great resource, and they may know students that have tried to start a chapter, or they may have connections, or can tell you somebody nearby. I'm a huge fan of having interns in my day job, and I think just having interns lets you connect with the law schools. I mean, you get applications from all over, and you get to talk to people, and you get a sort of feel for the lay of the land of where are the schools that there are people interested in animal law. And so I think finding other opportunities outside of those classes to engage with law students can open up some of those connections.
Yeah, and don't forget, most communities have some kind of animal advocate group in them, whether it's the local shelter, and if they have kind of an advocacy list or bent, or an actual like animal rights group, or all of the above. There are also a lot of national animal organizations who keep track of who's out there in different communities. So if you poke around a bit and say, do you know anyone who's a law student there who's interested in animals? It's amazing what can turn up.
Thank you. I'll just ask one more question, because I do want to leave some time at the end to open it up for conversation, and then some closing remarks. So do you ever incorporate student input or feedback into the content of your course or your syllabus? And if so, when and how do you do that?
I always try to, because I think it's more interesting to the students. In one of my courses, I actually set aside a a day, one class session. We call hot topics or something like that, and hope that the students will pick something. That can be like pulling teeth sometimes, especially if they're brand new to the subject. That although one year I did have a student who was obsessed with teacup puppies, and so that she basically convinced everybody else in the class that we had to talk about that. I broadened it to sort of like genetic modification of animals in general, but so I definitely try to gather that, and so one way is just polling the students directly, setting aside time to do that. We're ahead of certain class sessions, but you really want student buy-in on how that's going to work. One of the best pieces of advice I got early on in teaching at Georgetown was to view the syllabus as a contract, because if you change it all the time on students, they will kill you on reviews. And at George Mason, I was told the only way my class ever goes away is if I lose enrollments or my reviews are worse than the university at large. And that's so far held true. They've stayed up and they're better. And so I sort of view the syllabus as a contract. And so when we go in the first day, talk to the students about how much they want to be responsive to sort of what's happening or issues that they're interested in. And if they're bought into that, then I think you can incorporate that. I also do some polling sometimes on Canvas or some of the other sort of software systems that are available for teaching, Blackboard, something like that.
This isn't so much incorporating it in a syllabus, but at the first school I taught at, I had the midterm grade was class presentations and let the students pick topics that they were interested in and sort of dive deep and then come to the class and give a 10 or 15-minute presentation. And it was, and I didn't really put boundaries on it. It was, deals with animal law, maybe a few other things. And it was fascinating to see the diversity of topics that they went into. And it for me, it felt like it gave them an opportunity to explore an area they're interested in, but not just explore it, to come back to the class and teach the class about that. And I think that was very useful, and the students seemed to respond well to it.
Thank you all so much. I see that we have about 7 minutes left. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so I do want to open it up for conversation. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share any comments or questions. If I missed any questions in the chat, please feel free to resubmit them. I'd be happy to read them out for the panelists.
I did see there was one question about guest lecturers, and I just want to throw out there that I do use guest lecturers. I think they're great. Sometimes just having a different voice in the classroom, if you're not co-teaching, a different perspective, it's nice for students to just be able to have another contact as well. And I found guest lecturers sort of through the State Bar Association, through the ABA level. There's lots of different ways to connect up with people. And I usually have them come in and talk on a topic that maybe I'm less solid in. And so it's been really good for both me and the students.
And sorry, Ralph, go ahead. Yeah, maybe this is a lazy answer, but I found that guest lecturers are a good chance to get a breather. I mean, if you're heavy in class and there's a ton of grading and you're a bit underwater, having somebody else come talk for 45 minutes kind of lets you regroup and just listen for a little bit. And then to Rebecca's point, I mean, you're not an expert on everything rather. So having people that know stuff come in and talk about it, like environmental stuff is way out of my wheelhouse. And I've had people come in and talk about CAFOs and discharge and that sort of stuff. And the students are going to get a lot more from somebody else that practices in that area than from me.
And using guest lecturers for very timely issues, that's another way to sort of keep it relevant. So inviting someone in who just authored an amicus brief in a big case or something like that to talk about it, students will love that. I think it's also, I'm going to flip that a little bit. I think it's also a good way to get into teaching is to do some guest teaching at other classes if you're able to. Many classes can incorporate guest speakers by Zoom, so you don't even have to be located in the area that the class is. And so if you're interested in that, you can find out, what makes you comfortable or uncomfortable, being in the classroom and guest lecturing. Maybe many of you have already done this, but I guest lectured at many people's classes, including Nancy's, before I stole her syllabus, for years before I ended up teaching. And so I think that, and I still do guest lectures because I think it's it's fun. And so that's a good idea if you want to get into this, is to have done guest lectures various places, and maybe something that you can sell the administration on at an institution that you're pitching a class.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Professor Perry, were you going to say something?
I was just going to comment that I think this is such a great chance for us to all talk, and I hope we will find a way to stay connected and be available to each other. But our answers are just our answers for our experience in our moment in time for this institution. For, you know, they're not universal right and wrongs at all in this. And each of you have your own strengths and your own benefits that you bring to this work. So lean on those, you know, and lean on your own instincts, and then lean on others to get the help you need. But please don't be discouraged if something, you know, someone says here, it doesn't fit your situation, because I think persistence is the most important quality with any of this. And there's almost always a way if you can find the right resources around you. So I'm excited so many people are here and interested in this.
Thank you so much for saying that. I see one more question in the chat. So what kinds of qualifications do law schools want from people trying to teach animal law? How many years of practical experience, animal law, LLM, etc.?
I can't wait to hear the answer to this, because
I think it depends on the school, to be honest. And I've had some experience even beyond the two schools that I currently teach for, interacting with folks that were hiring for jobs, and it was varied in terms of how robust the program is that the animal law class is viewed as fitting into, whether it's an existing course. If you're pitching a whole new course, then it's going to be a seminar that's offered at an easy time in the schedule, and it's just for curiosity. You know, maybe, and depending on the school, you know, they may not look for specific requirements at all. And I've heard that story many, many times over. But then occasionally there are gigs where the school will be, you know, a little bit more interested. And I don't know what the qualifications, you know, are from school to school. In that, you know, when I first got started teaching at George Mason, it's because someone else pitched the class and was told that he wasn't qualified enough to teach it. I'm not sure what made him unqualified, and so he roped me into it. I'm not sure I was qualified to teach it either, but somehow the gap in 2 years of experience or something was enough. I don't know. And so I think it's really kind of unknown, at least to me, exactly what schools are looking for qualifications.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would just add, if it's something you're worried about or something you've encountered, you've gotten that feedback, it might be a great opportunity to try to offer to co-teach, to partner up with somebody who could fill in some experience gaps and could help you sort of sell the course to the administration. Might be a route that you think about taking.
Thank you so much. And with just about 1 minute left, I want to take this time to thank all of our panelists so much for all of your insight and for being willing to talk with all of us today. I hope that everyone who was able to attend today and enjoyed it and found it useful. I do just want to share a couple announcements. So as I mentioned at the beginning, our next webinar session will be on March 6th from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. The topic of that webinar is what to do with your course. So far, we have one panelist that will be joining us, Joshua Leugman. He is a trial attorney at the Department of Justice and also another adjunct professor here at GW. We are looking for other panelists, so if anyone is interested in joining us to do that, please feel free to reach out to me. I just dropped my email in the chat. Be more than happy to talk with you and to talk with anyone that may be interested in joining that. And yeah, if there's no other questions, thank you all again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.